It's week 11, day 73 of my full-time chronic pain rehabilitation journey. My name is Jason, and today I'm going to share 3 key principles of physical rehabilitation. You should not attempt rehabilitation without them. But first, a quick status update. I figured out what I'm allergic to, and it had nothing to do with the protein powders I was ingesting in my protein shake. Turns out it's spring, and I have spring allergies, so I got some Claritin D, and that should solve that problem. I've also figured out why I've had gradual pain increase over the last several weeks and why my sleep is disrupted. That also had nothing to do with the protein powder. Can you say red herring? What it really was, when I look back at my data, I figured out that I started going to the physical therapist around that time. And so these new therapies like dry needling and traction, and now an oscillation therapy, manual adjustment therapy, have caused increased pain and sleeplessness for me. It was quite clear once I looked at what had changed in my data, so I'm really glad that I had it. I'm nursing 2 minor injuries. One of these is old. A long time ago I hurt myself bench pressing too much weight too quickly, and I tore my biceps tendon slightly. It was not operable, and guess what? It's still with me. It flares up from time to time. It is inhibiting my ability to lift more weight. So I consulted my physical therapist, and we have some new exercises I can do for that, and my physical trainer showed me how to do them correctly. The other one is my SI joint. In case you don't know what that is, it is the junction between your lower body and upper body. And so all weight transfer goes through it. So lower body exercises can influence it and cause problems there, and I have done just that. All right, the tip for today is related to resistance training. It is to always do a warm-up set of every exercise. This is where you significantly lower the weight than what you would normally lift and do somewhere around 20 repetitions before you ever attempt to do a real amount of weight. And this can help prevent injury because it warms up the area. Doing warm-up sets is particularly important on the first set of exercises you're doing for the day. As you go farther into the day and are doing different kinds of exercises, later on, it's not as critical, but for that first couple of exercises that you're doing, you should do a warm-up set, get the muscles moving, get the blood pumping there, get them ready to lift a heavier load. And if you do that, you are going to help prevent injury, which is a key point of rehabilitating your body. You don't want to add to your existing suffering. On to today's topic, 3 key principles of physical rehabilitation. I'm repeating these. I've mentioned them in prior videos. Don't tune out. I'm repeating them because I violate them still. And if I'm doing it, chances are you'll do it too, if you even remember them. So I'm repeating them so you'll remember them and so you will not violate them. And hopefully you will learn from my experience and not repeat my mistakes. That's why I'm offering myself up as a bad example in certain cases. All right, the 3 principles are: be disciplined, be incremental, and listen to your body. On the subject of being disciplined, this is foundational to everything you'll do and everything I'm going to mention hereafter. It is, like all things, a process, meaning developing discipline takes time, it's iterative, and you're going to make some mistakes as you do it and become more disciplined over time, learn from your lack of discipline and some of the consequences of that. That will help to reinforce the fact that you should be disciplined more often, and you eventually will get to the point where you are essentially a human metronome. I am not there yet. One area where you have to be disciplined from the beginning is keeping records. This is so important. I'll explain why in a minute. But if you're not keeping records of every exercise you're doing, how many repetitions, how much weight, you will not be able to exercise the discipline that I'm talking about when you're doing resistance training. The next principle is to be incremental. What this means is you need to make small, controlled changes. Slow and steady wins the race. Like the tortoise and the hare, remember that? The tortoise wins. In the case of rehabilitating any injury or trying to rehabilitate a debilitated body, that was a tongue twister, you must be the tortoise, not the hare. And there's always a temptation to be the hare, and if you try to be the hare, you will pay for it, possibly severely. All right, I have 2 examples of this. One is at the program level. So when I started out, before I even started doing full-time rehab, I did physical therapy for almost 2 months. I then introduced swimming, and then I introduced a personal trainer after that and resistance training. And then I tried to introduce yoga a little too quickly, we'll go into that in a minute, and had to backtrack a bit. But I'm doing this in an incremental fashion, trying to introduce changes in a somewhat slow, methodical fashion, even though I am going pretty quick. The other example is with resistance training. I have a hard and fast, actually not a hard and fast rule, a hard rule. You do not want to change this. And it is only increment weights weekly. So if you're lifting a certain amount with for example, with your leg muscles, your quads, you only increment that weight by 10 pounds the next week on a weekly basis, not a daily basis at all. You should keep the weight the same for the entire week and then increment it 10 pounds the next week. For weaker muscles like your arms, you should only increment 5 pounds. In some cases, I would suggest using only 2.5 pounds. It kind of depends on how you're doing, but you should not violate this rule ever, because I've done it and I do tend to pay for it, and I'm paying for it right now. For example, my SI joint problem came from using too much weight on the decline squat. So I went from 330 pounds to 360 pounds in the same week. I'm doing my math really quickly, but I think 30 pounds is more than 10. So I violated my own rule, and now I am having SI joint problems. While my leg muscles were willing and capable, my SI joint was not. It was weak. But I couldn't figure that out. I could have figured that out slowly if I'd gone up 10 pounds at a time. Instead, I went 30, and now I am paying a price for it. And I cannot do any decline squats for probably a week, maybe more. So I set myself back. Not good. The next principle is listen to your body. When you have pain, for example, like I have in my SI joint right now, you must pause or decrease the load or work on some other body part that's not going to affect the afflicted area. If you don't, you could be set back weeks, months, and in some cases, years, or at least a year. Probably not years, but at least a year. I have an example of this. My personal trainer, God bless his heart, hurt his shoulder a year ago. He tore something, and he is only now able to use it again in a similar fashion how he used it a year ago. In other words, this set him back 12 months. This is a perfect example of the tortoise versus the hare. It's also a perfect example for even the elite among us, those who know how to do resistance training the best, still seem to violate certain principles and hurt themselves at times. And so you can never be too careful, and being a hare is a bad idea. Being a tortoise is pretty much always a good idea, whether you are rehabilitating an injury or not. I have another example. Let's go back to my decline squat, and let's look at these 3 principles in connection with my decline squat. So there is a temptation to post gains on Facebook for me or be able to report in these videos a new personal record. I love doing that because, one, I feel like I'm moving forward, it signals process, and I like to brag a little bit. I'm human. But the goal of my rehabilitation journey is not to power lift. It is to restore function to my entire body as much as is possible. So I keep forgetting that sometimes and want to go for the gold when I should be not aiming for a medal at all. This demonstrates my jump from 330 pounds to 360 pounds, a lack of discipline. I did keep records though, so I knew I was doing that, but I wasn't disciplined enough to actually look at the records and abide by my rule. I wasn't incremental. I didn't go up by 10 pounds, I went up by 30. But after all of that failed, I did listen to my body. I am listening to my body right now. I am no longer doing decline squats or anything that will affect the SI joint for at least a week, at which point I will test the waters again. Fighting for your life means learning how to rehab according to correct principles. It's the only way to minimize injuries and setbacks and ensure long-term progress. If you find my videos helpful, please pass them along and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep fighting for your life.